Hey everyone, AstroKid here. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. In today's video, it's the last video of the 12-part series on my channel where we talk about the 12 houses in your birth chart, and more specifically what it means when you have certain placements sitting in those houses. So without further ado, of course, we're going to talk about the 12th house. Now, the 12th house is a very specific house. It's a very special house in our charts, given it is the last house. And in my previous video, we talked about the 11th house, which is the house of gains. It's the house where we see opportunities come to us. We see gain of profit, gain of resources, gain of help from other people. However, once we get to the 12th house, we experience loss. We experience expenditure. We experience giving something away, but not getting it back. We can picture with the 12th house the symbolism of a drain. So it's the exit of our chart, it's the drain of our chart, it's right at the end. And what goes down a drain usually doesn't come back up. What goes out of the exit usually doesn't come back in. So that's the kind of metaphor we're dealing with the 12th house. And when it comes to planets in your 12th house, when it comes to the sign, the house ruler of your 12th house, you can see the themes you specifically experience when it comes to loss. How you experience loss, what areas of your life do you feel lost the most in. And the other key theme of the 12th house is expenditure. So things we spend money on that we don't necessarily see return on investment, things we give away, or losses we experience when it comes to our money, our resources. Again, the drain theme comes up, the drain metaphor, where you might throw money down the drain on something specific. So by looking at the planets in your 12th house, the sign of your 12th house, you can resonate with certain losses in your life or correlate certain losses with the themes of that planet or themes of that sign. And so speaking of sign, if some of you guys do have an empty 12th house, you can just take a look at the 12th house ruler that you do have. So if you had like Mars ruling your 12th house, you probably have Scorpio 12th house or Aries 12th house. So you might resonate with watching the Mars timestamp for that sign if you don't necessarily have any planets in the 12th house. And you can still watch the timestamp of your 12th house ruler even if you do have planets there. Granted that it does give a more overarching theme of your losses when it comes to that planetary ruler of that zodiac sign. So with that being said, you can watch this video for whatever chart you feel the most comfortable with, whatever you feel is the most accurate to you. If you feel comfortable watching your tropical chart, you can view the timestamp of the 12th house ruler or planet you have in the 12th house for that chart. But either way, this kind of just boils down the essence of the 12th house and what you can expect from it in terms of loss. So whatever chart mirrors that the best for you personally in your life, you can watch that timestamp. So if you have the sun sitting in your 12th house, then what this says about you and how it might manifest in your life is that you might feel this theme of loss when it comes to your ego. Having sun here is a very unique placement since sun feels more hidden in the 12th house. It's more isolated in the 12th house, whereas sun is usually a planet that is very comfortable higher in the chart. In the 10th house, for example, 9th house, for example, the sun essentially wants to be seen. So when the sun goes into the 12th house, this kind of hidden position, you might feel this loss of ego in the sense that you feel very humble naturally, or you're somebody that might hide or maybe obscure your ego, obscure your identity, your sense of self. And for some people, you can even have trouble expressing your sense of self, expressing your identity, asserting yourself, asserting your ego, thus making you someone that might feel very humble, naturally speaking. You also might feel somewhat passive or not necessarily super aggressive with how you express yourself to others. So that's one manifestation you can feel with sun in the 12th is kind of like a loss of ego, maybe a loss of identity for some people. And let's talk expenditures. So sun in the 12th, when it comes to your expenditures in life, the things you kind of give but don't get back or money you lose specifically, I want to talk about energy with you. So sun in the 12th, when it comes to your energy, your vitality, that's also a significator of the sun, is your health, your vitality. And you might feel a little bit sometimes drained in life, or you feel easily drained. You feel like your health kind of takes a toll at certain points throughout your life. And maybe it doesn't take a lot of activity for you to feel drained. And you might do something in life, do a physical activity, and feel quickly drained by that, or drained by other people. That is something that's very possible with this placement of drainage when it comes to your energy and your vitality. And it might take a lot for you to conserve that energy. You might like to feel isolated or be by yourself in order to regain your energy. And when it comes to literal expenditures, so like financial things, you might spend a lot on yourself, spend a lot on self-care, spend a lot on health related items. And you might be someone who feels like there is no limit or constriction on how much you spend on yourself, how much you spend on self-care, how much you spend on health. You can be somewhat of a health passionate person where you don't have a budget for health related things. You don't feel like you need to be penny pinching when it comes to those things. So spending a lot of money on yourself in general, and especially your health, your well-being, can be something that is an expenditure for you, where you spend a lot and maybe not, you don't necessarily see the money back from spending a lot on those things, but it's just something you feel like you need to spend money on in order to feel a stronger sense of self. With Moon in the 12th house, then what this says about you and how it might manifest in your life is that, first things first, this can be a very sensitive placement. As you do know already, Moon is the most sensitive planet, so having it in the 12th house, you can be someone who feels drained emotionally or easily drained emotionally. There is a certain bandwidth we all have with our emotions where it might take a certain amount of experiences for you to feel drained emotionally. And I imagine with Moon in the 12th, you can feel that bandwidth being very short with you, where experiences kind of emotionally drain you, maybe people emotionally drain you, even your family specifically or mother specifically, since Moon does rule mother. So that can be a sensitive topic, which I don't want to dive too deep into, but as you can imagine, those sort of people that are relevant to the Moon can be draining to you. And another huge topic with the Moon, a main theme with lunar energy, is security, is comfort. So you're someone that might work really hard or feel a constant need to feel mentally secure. And the way you might feel that is through solitude, maybe being by yourself, being in your own bubble helps you to create more of a stronger emotional bandwidth like we talked about earlier. So that feeling of security might feel lost at certain points in your life where you know what it feels like to lose your sense of security. You know what it feels like to lose your comfort or lose some sort of mental security specifically. That can be an emotion you are familiar with. And even situations that relate to loss of security can be very draining for you. So overall, sensitivity is huge with this placement, and kind of feeling that drainage of energy, drainage of mental energy, especially in certain circumstances, can be strong for you. But one thing I did learn, and I think I learned this from KRS astrology, it might be another Vedic astrologer, but it's something I'm curious to know how you guys feel about, and you can chime in about if it's true for you. But someone said, an astrologer said, that Moon in the 12th people, or if your 12th house is ruled by the Moon, when you go to foreign lands, you experience more mental peace, or you experience more mental harmony specifically, and maybe being in your home environment, being in the environment in which you grew up in, especially with your mother or mother figure, can be kind of stressful for you, where you feel that drain or loss like we talked about. But when you go to foreign lands, maybe you feel more relief with that, or you feel mental harmony, you feel some sort of burden lifted mentally for you. So that's something I heard. I want to say KRS astrology said it. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was a Vedic astrologer who did mention that going to foreign lands kind of relieves this drainage, emotional baggage, loss like we talked about. So chime in on that. You guys can tell me in the comments if that's true for you, if you've been to foreign lands and you felt that sort of way, but let us know in the comments how that experience has been for you. So if Mercury is sitting in your 12th house, then what this says about you and how it might manifest in your life is that you're someone that might feel drained or experience loss when it comes to verbal expression. With this placement, you're somebody who is naturally very intelligent. However, you might keep your thoughts to yourself, you might keep your thoughts hidden, you might only express your thoughts or verbally express yourself in isolation. So therefore, when it comes to social dynamics where you have to discuss something, where you have to debate something with other people, especially in school, you might not feel the most keen or assertive with what you have to say. Your verbal self-expression might be a little bit more hidden, withdrawn. You might express yourself in some sort of really specific way that many people might not understand. And that brings me to something that might be common with this placement and something you might experience. And you can let us know in the comments if this is true for you. But criticism. So you're someone that might experience criticism from other people, and even through verbal self-expression, if you express your opinion or what you have to say, people might criticize that even more so than other Mercury placements. And you yourself might have a kind of critical outlook or criticize things within your mind or kind of privately criticize things, but criticism can be a huge theme here, and having people criticize you, especially for what you say, and then maybe you have that internal dialogue of criticism as well. But kind of looping back to that maybe specific way you like to express yourself, it might not be verbal or might not be in the way other people expect you, but you're someone who could like to express yourself through music, for example, through poetry, something that isn't too logical or systematic or concrete, something that's more fluid. So your verbal communication might not be as structured as other people's, but you definitely are very intelligent. It's just that you might express your verbal thoughts in different ways, or you express it through music, through art, through poetry, in kind of unconventional ways. And given that, a lot of you guys might feel sometimes misunderstood or verbally misunderstood, and hence why it feels maybe draining for you to consistently reaffirm your point or explain things to people or argue with people. You might not feel too keen on doing that since it might drain you more than other placements. So now for Venus. So if you have Venus sitting in your 12th, then what this says about you and how it might manifest in your life definitely has to do with your money, with your finances, with your resources. Venus, as you do know already, is the planet that represents those things. So generally speaking, for a lot of you guys, you can be someone who does spend a lot of money or has high expenditures in their life. And depending on the sign you have Venus in, this can vary on what you spend money on. But generally speaking, you can spend a lot of money on pleasurable things, on experiences that bring you pleasure, on material things that bring you pleasure. There's this theme of hedonism that can be strong with this placement, where you can spend money on things that bring you pleasure without blinking an eyelash, or however that saying goes. But you'll spend money on art, on other people, on fashion, on anything sort of pleasurable, right? And not really expect return on investment, not expect to get that money back. You might feel like this is what I'm spending money on, and that's just it. I want to experience pleasure. So pleasure seeking or wanting to feel pleasure and spending money to even get that, copious amounts of money to get that, can be strong here. And ironically enough, a lot of you guys can be keen on saving money with this placement. But there's a specific way a lot of you guys might save money, and that is through certain bank accounts that you don't necessarily access regularly. So the prime example of that is like a retirement account, where you put money into that every year, but you don't take money out of that necessarily until you retire. Or you have like a Roth IRA account with a certain percentage yield, and that grows over time. You don't access that every day. And you can just put your money in certain places where it's like isolated there and you don't touch it. So even though many of you guys might have an inclination to spend your money on pleasurable things, experiences, at the same time you might be good at saving money or just kind of putting it away from yourself and hiding it from yourself and keeping it in bank accounts that kind of grow over time, and especially retirement accounts. I can imagine many of you guys might have started a retirement account for yourself at a very young age, or maybe at an age that other people weren't really worried about that. So that's really strong here too, not just this hedonistic or spending, but also kind of saving your money for a rainy day can be strong here too. And another thing I will touch on with this is relationships. So Venus, as you know, does represent relationships. So you're someone that can be very generous in relationships, very giving. We talked about this a little bit on the Instagram post I have about Venus through the houses, but Venus in the 12th can give this kind of self-sacrificing nature. You donate to charity, you donate to people, you give your things to people without necessarily looking for it back or having a return on investment with material items you give away, money you give away. You can be somewhat charitable, so to speak. And also in relationships, for some people, not everyone watching this, of course, you can experience unrequited love. So again, there's that theme of drainage with the 12th house, giving, not getting back. And so you might give your affection to people, give your love, give admiration, and maybe you don't see that back from people or have that reciprocal kind of back and forth when it comes to love. I can imagine for some people, unrequited love can be a theme throughout your life. So you can let us know in the comments about any of the themes we talked about, how you feel about them, if you've experienced them. And that essentially is what Venus in the 12th can represent for some people. So if Mars is sitting in your 12th house, then what this says about you and how it might manifest in your personal life is that it has a lot to do with your vitality, with your physical energy. So you're somebody that might feel a loss when it comes to those things, or specifically you might feel the sense of drainage. So I was talking about this a little bit with the moon and the 12th house people, but there's this kind of theme of bandwidth when it comes to what we can do physically, what we can do mentally. And for you, you might feel like this bandwidth of energy can be short at times, or you feel drained easily, or there's only so much you can do before you feel exhausted. So Mars here can really take a toll on your just energy levels in general, your expression of your energy. You can have trouble expressing yourself physically or your body physically. Again, there's that theme of maybe feeling too drained to express yourself fully in a physical manner, but your energy or vitality, generally speaking, can take a toll a little bit with this placement. And metaphorically, Mars represents anger. So there's someone that might find it challenging to express your anger at times, or you have that feeling of anger, but maybe you don't know where to channel it, or you channel it in certain ways that might get misunderstood by people. And 12th house does deal with criticism as well. So with Mars here, I can imagine with you, if you have a conflict with someone, if you have anger to express, if you have to assert yourself, there can be a backlash or criticism that comes with that. So assertion, that's the topic we just touched on, but that is such an important theme with Mars. It represents how we assert ourselves, how we stand up for ourselves, how do we defend ourselves. And so for you, Mars in the 12th, you can feel sometimes it is challenging to do so. It can feel draining to do so, to constantly fight battles, constantly stand up for yourself. Conflict can really, really drain you. And conflict is something that drains most people, but for you specifically, I can imagine it can be a bit challenging to handle conflict at times, since it can feel so draining to you, draining to your energy. And for some people, you can even have trouble standing up for yourself, trouble handling conflict, trouble defending yourself. And we just talked about that theme of criticism. So you might feel kind of criticized for standing up for yourself, criticized for asserting yourself, even more so than other placements, where I feel like you could set a boundary, and setting a boundary is fine. Socially, most people will set a boundary, people accept it. But when you do it, it's like people might have a problem with that, and it might start conflict with people because it's because of you setting a boundary. So you can kind of go into your experience with that if you feel comfortable in the comments, and chime in on how you feel about this theme of asserting yourself. And then, like we talked about earlier, the theme of vitality as well. And when it comes to Mars being in your 12th, and how that experience is for you, generally speaking. So now for Jupiter. Now Jupiter is naturally comfortable in the 12th house. Jupiter is a significator of the 12th house. Since the 12th house, indirectly, it does deal with charity. And Jupiter is that planet that does represent charity, generosity, giving, and that umbrella of having to do with giving your energy. So since Jupiter is such a generous planet, giving planet, you're someone who might kind of mimic that as well. And especially with your career or reputation, or sort of like your philosophy on life, you might be someone who is a humanitarian, someone who is passionate about giving, someone who is keen on charity. I can imagine this manifesting as someone who works in a charity or works somewhere without ever really expecting a paycheck. Or you would willingly quit your job to work at a charity or start a foundation, something along those lines of just helping people out of the kindness of your heart without expecting a profit, without expecting revenue. Speaking of profit, a lot of you guys might even work at a nonprofit, work in a dynamic where there is no huge paycheck, there is no revenue for you directly, but you're just kind of giving to give. And often your giving, your generosity can involve humanity, like we talked about. So just giving to create a better society, to create a better living experience for everyone. You might be concerned with the greater good of the whole. And so a lot of your expenditures, for example, a lot of what you spend money on but don't get that return on investment on, might have to do with charity donations, can deal with sacrificing maybe some of your resources to give to other people, maybe on education, for example. The list can go on, but your expenditures can be just tied to this theme of being charitable. And the last thing I'll say about this placement is that Jupiter deals with protection. And a lot of you guys do know that already. And so with Jupiter, whatever house it's in, it tends to protect you or protect you in circumstances relevant to that house. And 12th house, as you do know, it's the house of loss, the house of drainage. So hence why Jupiter kind of takes on a positive spin in this house, where it kind of protects you from loss, or it protects you through situations that you experience loss. So like we talked about, even though you might feel the urge to like quit your job and work at a charity or work at a nonprofit that might not pay that much, you still kind of benefit anyway, or you still kind of remain protected through that, maybe financially, where it's like, even though that is kind of a loss of time, it's a drainage of your resources, you still might end up being financially prosperous or having your basic needs met, even though there might be a lot of expenditures there. So Jupiter kind of gives this goodwill, this kind of free pass or protection to you, even though you do or might experience losses or expenditures. You remain protected through that, and that it does protect you from certain losses in your life. So if Saturn sits in your 12th house, then what this says about you and how it might manifest in your life is that in your career and what you do for a living, there can be losses there. You might experience the theme of feeling drained in your career or having obstacles in your career that really drain you. And Saturn is a natural significator of the 12th house, so Saturnian themes naturally resonate with the themes of 12th house, which is loss. And so with Saturn here, loss can be kind of like a karmic lesson for you, learning how to deal with loss, learning how to let things go. Saturn specifically can kind of give this restrictive energy with your expenditures or how you spend money. So you might kind of be keen on saving money a lot of the time, or you might experience spending money or losing money, and you kind of have to deal karmically with the burden of how to navigate that financial loss. And going back to the point about career, you can be in a career that has to do with charity, that has to do with giving back to people. Again, there's that theme of giving without having some sort of return. So charitable organizations or nonprofit organizations, somewhere that might not be the most financially rewarding or financially supportive, but working in places that are charitable can be a theme too with this placement. And one thing I will also highlight with Saturn in the 12th is obstacles. So we do know that Saturn represents obstacles and kind of blockages in our life. So the blockages you experience or the obstacles you experience can be very draining to you, can result in loss for you, and even more so than other people. There can be this theme of like having an obstacle and just feeling overcome by it, being drained by it. And Saturn, that planet of resilience, your resilience can be really tested in your life. That ability to fall and get back up is really something you might feel over the course of your life in a karmic sense. And the obstacles you do experience can be very draining for you. They can take a lot of your time, take a lot of your energy. They can be sort of like long or drawn out obstacles that take a lot of strength and resilience to deal with. And the last thing I'll say about this placement is criticism. So 12th house deals with criticism. Saturn kind of also represents criticism. But for you specifically, you can feel this theme of criticism in your career. So with whatever you do for work, like we talked about earlier, perhaps you work in humanitarianism or nonprofit, whatever your career is, you can kind of face backlash often, or criticism from your peers, or people kind of criticizing what you do for a living. You can even specifically experience this criticism from your boss, from authority figures, from people above you. And even in school, you do have teachers. Those people are authority figures. Any area of life where you have an authority figure, they can be kind of harsh on you or hard on you. There's kind of like that difficulty here with authority figures and being criticized specifically for some people with Saturn in the 12th. And if Rahu, aka the North Node, is sitting in your 12th house, then as it pertains to expenditures and a loss in your life, this is a very prominent placement for you since it is your North Node, South Node axis we're talking about. And so generally speaking, you can be someone with high expenditures. Maybe there's a lot of unexpected moments in your life where it's like you have to shell out a large amount of money, you have to get rid of something, you have to spend your resources. There can be themes of loss strongly throughout your life since this is the North Node, South Node axis, and a lot of your karmic experiences can involve loss. But other than that, though, to get more specific with this placement, when it comes to the expenditures that you do have, you might spend money on things that can be superficial Rahu is the entity that represents illusions or things that aren't necessarily as real as you think it is. So you yourself can be someone that might spend money on things that are not necessarily necessary, but are illusory in nature or superficial in nature. And that's for some people, not everybody, but that can be a possibility with this placement, is spending money on superficial things, and especially in copious amounts or copious ways, spending that way. And for another good chunk of people, you can spend money on travel, or travel can be a huge theme for you, where you spend money going to foreign lands, or maybe when you go to foreign lands, there's a lot of expenditures there. There can be a strong link for you of expenditures and then foreign lands on some level. Since 12th house does deal with foreign lands, Rahu represents foreign things, so you might spend money or have expenditures in that sense as well. So if Ketu, aka the South Node, is sitting in your 12th house, this means for you that loss might be a karmic experience. And in your past lives, that could have been a theme. And in this life, it can be something you might be used to dealing with. It can be a common occurrence for you. And almost ironically, it can be something you are naturally skilled at. And skilled in the sense where maybe you don't have to try to kind of be good at dealing with loss, but you might experience loss and you already know that feeling in a very familiar sense. Because like we talked about, it can be a past life theme for you. So there can be sort of like psychic element here, very spiritual element here, where you feel comfortable in the spiritual realm of life. You feel comfortable in the realm of life that isn't necessarily connected to the material world. And so given that loss of material things, loss of material resources might not be so devastating for you, or you don't feel so bothered by some sort of loss, because Ketu in the 12th already signifies potentially a past life that did involve loss. So subconsciously, you might know that feeling very well, even if you don't know it consciously. So therefore, any material loss in this life can maybe not move you too much or sway you too much when it comes to kind of the emotional backlash or dealing with loss, generally speaking. And given the karmic nature of this axis in your chart, you have Rahu in the 6th and then Ketu in the 12th. You can be learning over the course of your life how to ground yourself in the material. Like we talked about, you might be someone comfortable with the spiritual world, feeling disconnected, and naturally kind of feel inclined towards isolation or spending time on spiritual pursuits. But this life, you might be kind of learning how to kind of ground yourself into material things or integrate yourself in your daily life pattern, cultivate a routine for yourself, cultivate a sense of dealing with responsibilities. So escapism can be a theme here also with this placement of escaping into your own world, escaping into certain habits, but you're kind of learning over the course of your life in a very karmic sense how to obtain this kind of 6th house energy, which is more grounded in the material. With the last couple of things I'll say with this placement is that you can be someone who experiences a loss of sleep, or your sleep patterns can be inconsistent. Generally speaking, you might struggle with routines a little bit, or it takes you more effort to create a consistent routine, and maybe your sleep routine is one of those things where you can experience loss with that, or you're a night owl, you like to stay up at night. And connecting back to like that spiritual theme, maybe you like to do your spiritual activities at night, but loss of sleep can be a theme for some people. And something interesting I learned, I believe from a Vedic astrologer, I'm forgetting the name now, but some of you guys might resonate with this, is that you can have loss of sight with this placement. So potentially you wear glasses. It doesn't have to manifest as blindness, of course, but if you have to wear glasses, if you have naturally not so strong vision, that could be a result of this placement. So with that being said, overall, those are some themes you might experience with this placement, and feel free to comment your experience down below. So Pluto, if Pluto is sitting in your 12th house, then what this says about you and how it might manifest in your life is that this takes on a very strong psychological theme to it. Psychological or subconscious loss can be a theme here, in the sense that you're very subconsciously, psychologically, even for some people, psychically aware of your surroundings. And I believe we talked about this if you guys saw the video I did about psychic placements or placements in your birth chart that can cause psychic abilities. You can be someone who does have psychic abilities, and for some it can be kind of unwanted, where it feels like a burden, where it feels like a loss, or these kind of like psychic intuitive downloads that you get or abilities you have kind of causes draining to you. It can be somewhat uncomfortable. I feel like psychic abilities can be glamorized, but however, it's something that might kind of cause the native to feel lost or drained or burdened if you do have that. So given the subconscious element of this, and the 12th house does deal with sleep as well, you're someone that might experience loss of sleep or inconsistent sleep patterns. Maybe loss of sleep can be rooted in bad dreams, for example, or premonitions or paranoia, where there's this kind of like unsettled subconscious tempo or experience you might feel with Pluto sitting here, and it kind of causes this extremes or disruptions with your dream state or your subconscious mind, generally speaking, and that can result in feeling a little bit mentally stressed or anxious or not having consistent sleep pattern, so to speak. So the loss you experience with this placement can deal with those aspects as well. So with Uranus sitting in your 12th, then what this says about you and how you might experience loss in life is you might experience loss through extreme circumstances or unexpected circumstances, abrupt change. Uranus really deals with that theme of sudden changes, things really altering suddenly. So things that happen in your life that happen suddenly, that are extremely life-altering, can result in loss for you, involve loss for you, or just be very draining for you. This unexpected energy with Uranus can trigger that for you. And sort of like with Pluto, I feel like this can trigger a bit of psychic ability or very intuitive ability, where you channel intuitive ideas, you channel certain things that other people might not have access to in the conscious state. So because you might channel things, because you might have somewhat of a psychic ability or psychic intonation with the elements around us, that can be draining, that can be exhausting. And also loss of sleep can be possible. So again, similar with like Pluto in the 12th, where it's like you can have inconsistent sleep patterns, or you kind of get this electrified energy at night, where you're like a night owl, you want to do research, you want to do music, you don't want to sleep. Inconsistent sleep patterns can be there too. So loss of sleep can be a theme for some people as well. And if Neptune's sitting in your 12th house, this is a placement that I believe we talked about in the psychic abilities video, where I did a video a while ago about psychic placements in your birth chart. So you yourself might experience psychic abilities, and through these psychic abilities, they can be somewhat draining to you. They can be somewhat of a loss for you, where it's not like the ability is a loss, but maybe it causes loss or causes drainage, something that kind of tugs on your energy a bit. So some of the losses you might experience can be illusionary, or you might find that there is a strong need for discernment when it comes to certain circumstances in your life, whether or not it's a loss or something that's draining you. Neptune can kind of fog your subconscious perception here, where maybe you don't necessarily perceive something as a loss, maybe it's a gain for you, kind of blurs the lines here, especially psychically. And when it comes to expenditures, Neptune is a planet that can represent movies. It can represent glamour and makeup and things like that. So perhaps that's an expenditure for you, where you spend money on things, expenditures on things that are sort of illusionary in nature, that aren't necessarily concrete things that are practical or that you need, but there's expenditures there when it comes to sort of like the illusional elements of life, the creative elements of life that you do like to take part in. That being said, if you feel comfortable, leave your experiences and opinions down below. Thank you guys for watching this video and being a part of this series, and I'll see you in my next video.